Welcome back to the latest edition of the Audible presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Bruce Feldman. We actually taped this episode about 12 hours ago on Monday. There was a lot of court maneuvering that had taken place in the latest round of the Brendan Sorsby saga. And as you'll see, most of the episode that we taped was Ralph and I discussing how this had kind of turned, and it seemed like it was a 180 from the direction it was just a few days ago, where it didn't, as Ralph said, it did not look like the way things were shaping up, Brendan Sorsby was actually going to get to play for Texas Tech this year. So fast forward to Monday evening, new developments. Now, Brendan Sorsby, according to the sources that The Athletic has, as well as other outlets have reported, Brendan Sorsby is planning on entering the NFL supplemental draft. And that comes on the heels of what has been a very wild day in the Big 12. As you'll see in the rest of our episode, we'll kind of lay the context out of that, and we'll have more on the Sorsby case as it relates to the next steps at Texas Tech in the next episode. Joined by my colleague from The Athletic, Ralph Russo. Stu actually is not here today, but he kind of is. So what I mean by that is he's went on vacation again. And on Friday, we taped our win totals episode regarding the SEC. You will get to that. You will see Stu's handsome face in probably 20 minutes. But Ralph, a lot of news, as you predicted and as we expected, coming out of the Big 12 and the latest twists and turns of the Brendan Sorsby case. So we are taping this Monday afternoon. Monday morning was very eventful. A lot of stuff going on. Walk us through where we are with this as we stand now.
Yeah, I'll do the best I can. I was traveling around this morning. We probably should have called Justin Williams. He's totally on top of this, and definitely if you go to The Athletic, Justin and Chris Vanini were sort of anchoring today's coverage because it all broke early as I was getting on a plane. I guess the best thing you say is the Big 12 sort of pre-sued. Is that a thing? They basically came out and said, listen, if, the Texas AG threatened us that we couldn't do anything, we couldn't simply enforce our bylaws. So that triggers that triggered the Big 12 to file some of its own legal briefings and threaten the lawsuit to say, no, you can't do that. Texas Tech and the Texas Attorney General, especially for this ruling that was in a local district court, can't stop us from doing the things that we're allowed to do, which is possibly sanction Texas Tech if Texas Tech uses Brendan Sorsby. That's the key thing there, right? They didn't come out and say what they were going to do, but they they gave more than obvious hints within the filing that, what our options are: financial penalties or withholding them from the conference championship if they were to use this ineligible player. So that's where we are right now. I've got a couple of other things in mind, but I don't want to bog us down. Right now, Texas Tech is basically sort of preparing a legal defense for its moves if it needs to do something to prevent Sorsby from playing. Also should be noted, the Utah Attorney General wrote a letter in support. The Kansas Attorney General wrote a letter in support. This comes after last Friday. Oklahoma's Attorney General wrote a letter in support. So this is getting very complicated from a legal standpoint, and lots of people are weighing in. And it's a good thing to remember. Only one judge in one county of this United States of America has deemed that Brendan Sorsby is eligible right now. So apparently the rest of the country is basically treating him as ineligible.
Yeah, I reached out to our friend Tom Mars, who's a very prominent attorney when it comes to NCAA matters. And I said, what is your read on this? And he just basically said, Federal District Court will declare that the Big 12 has the right to enforce its bylaws. Checkmate, game over. And essentially, it's like the supremacy clause of the Constitution makes federal court superior to state court. I don't know, Ralph. It's wild that it's just been a week And there's some stuff, so I don't want to say steps were skipped over, but at some point we had a podcast. There was like the other thing where there was the 22-minute video that Texas Tech brass did. I don't even know I don't know how to categorize it beyond that. Where Joey McGuire was talking.
Reasons, for doing what they're doing, but also not committing to playing Brendan Sorsby. By the way, the Big 12 in its filing says that Texas Tech has indicated that it would play Sorsby. They haven't done that publicly, but the Big 12 is claiming they've done that behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fascinating situation where, take like 10 steps back from this and you're sitting there thinking, okay, we know they spent, I don't know, upwards of $5 million to get Brendan Sorsby. And they've talked a lot, especially on, that 22-minute clip, about his worry about his mental health and all sorts of human aspects of this. Whether it's an unintended consequence or not, like the pressure on Brendan Sorsby and all of this coming out of this. I mean, it's been a week. It feels like it's been 2 months of this back and forth. I feel like the sooner this gets reconciled will be the better for everybody because it's dragging on. Big 12 Media Days is actually the first national media days of all of them. It's like a couple days after July 4th. I'll be down in
July 5th or something,
Dallas 8th. For that. Yeah, it's a little later than that, but it's like not much. I think it's like July 6th it starts. I don't know who's first, if Texas Tech is on the first day or not, but that's going to hang over everything in the Big 12 if we're in this kind of state of limbo. I mean, from how this is played to you, from looking at it, anything change in your mind over the course of all these like machinations of this as a lot of legal folks have weighed in and piled on?
Yeah, and I'm interested in what you have to say about this, Bruce, because this is me being completely theoretical. Like, there's no reporting behind this. I am just positing a theory. The supplemental draft deadline, I believe, is June 22nd, right?
I think he has like about a week to declare for that. It's not that much further off. Yeah. So as we're taping, it's 7 days. So yes.
I'm gonna guess, this is just a pure guess, that in the next 7 days, it is determined that Brendan Sorsby will not be at Texas Tech and he will declare for the supplemental draft. I may be big wrong here. Big, super wrong, I might be. I am really just guessing. But I think the way this is stacked up legally is not really working in Texas Tech's favor. It's just like there's going to be so much uncertainty. How do you talked about media days. How do you head into a season basically just going to draw a line, say, nope, doesn't care, don't care what your judge says, this judge says, we're going to go with our judge and we're going to play him. And then maybe in October you start playing him and another judge says, well, I think I think the Big 12 is allowed to declare you ineligible, so you're just ineligible. Like it's just, there's no way this is going to get sorted out with all the legal arms and tentacles to it. So now you're putting Texas Tech into a really just an untenable situation. I got a couple more points I want to make, but I just wonder, do you think that he might just maybe it's Sorsby himself, Tech and Sorsby, some combination of they get together and say like, listen, Brendan, this is not working. Like we need to move on here.
Yeah, one of the coaches I had spoke to a few days ago in the Big 12 thought it was going to end up where they were going to try to find some kind of soft landing, that this was essentially become untenable for Texas Tech, for the program, for the team. I don't want to say it's of no fault of Sorsby, because obviously this all started with him and a lot of it, but I think they got themselves into a position. The most prominent person in all this has been Cody Campbell, right? He writes an op-ed the day after this, or an op-ed comes out the day after this. There's just so many layers of this. And you're sitting there thinking, without Brendan Sorsby, I think there still would likely be the favorite of the Big 12 because you have Will Hammond. We all saw him play really well in relief at a tough place to play last year at Utah. He definitely has ability. From what I've heard from people close to the program, they feel like a lot of the people in that locker room feel like he should be the guy. They really believe in him. So now it's like, okay, how did they get to that point? I have no idea, if the NFL looks at him differently now through this lens than they did 10 days ago, as some people in the personnel are going to start to vet him, go, okay, is he worth it for us to maybe spend a 3rd round pick on or a 4th round pick? I don't know. There's a lot of stuff there, it's a really convoluted story.
But Bruce, he will, I know we can't guarantee this, but he will end up in an NFL training camp. He is absolutely talented. In fact, I think an NFL team might think, get a little bargain here. We can put it in for a 5th or 6th round draft pick and have to pay him this is becoming a low risk, high reward situation because he's a big talented kid and you're not going to have to invest that much. So that's what that's another aspect of this, which I find kind of interesting and frankly a little infuriating. Brendan Sorsby's punishment is going to the NFL. This kid is not a martyr. I feel bad for him. But he screwed up and he tossed away millions of dollars. Happens. But he's not being banned from playing football. He is definitely going to get charged with something at some point. We keep kind of glossing over this. He is almost certainly not going to jail. He is also almost certainly going to face some type of legal charges, even if they're just a bunch of misdemeanors for all of his illegal gambling. But yeah, I think he'll end up in an NFL camp. I wonder if I don't know if you've heard from anybody who doesn't think no, the NFL will shun him.
No, I think at the price of, especially if it's somewhere around the 5th or 6th round, I remember seeing when it first seemed like he almost had no choice but to go to the supplemental, there was chatter from some NFL people going, oh, he could be, and when I say NFL people, I mean NFL reporters, that, oh, he's talented enough where he could maybe be a 1st round pick and everything. And it's like, there were intangible questions about Sorsby's game to begin with. Then on top of it, now you're talking about the psyche of somebody who is talking about coming through addiction and all that, there's a lot of questions. So, maybe he's a 4th or 5th round pick, right? I think in a little ways, it's not the greatest parallel here, but the guy I wrote about a week or so before the draft, Ewar Bernard had never played in a tackle football game, but is the freakiest of all freak athletes, from Nigeria. Howie Roseman knows a ton about personnel moves. They spent a late round pick on him just because the chance of the upside here, he may never be good enough to play in a game. It's a big roll of the dice. But if if some of that physical ability translates and he learns the game and everything else, he's a bargain. Because as we're talking about, if it's way different to spend a top 50 pick than it is to spend, a 5th, 6th, 7th round guy, especially for that position, a quarterback. If he turns out to be a guy where, you see potential in him and you feel like, okay, he can be in our quarterback room and not be, because there's definitely been guys who are talented where I know teams wrestle with, I don't know if I want him around our starter. He'll mess, this kid's personality. I don't know if we're talking about that with Sorsby. Whatever questions he has, I'm not sure that it seems like, oh, he's problematic to be around. I don't think from everything I've heard, it's not that. So going to be fascinating, Ralph.
Let me just do 2 very quick things. I think there has been some suggestion that if the Big 12 keeps Texas Tech out of the championship game, if they play Sorsby, that doesn't mean Texas Tech couldn't go 11-1 or 12-0 and make the playoff. The playoff, I don't think, has this exact scenario laid out, but A couple of years ago, JMU, when they were transitioning up, was ineligible for the postseason, ineligible for the Sun Belt title, and the college football playoff did not rank them. I understand this is different. That is not a one-to-one scenario, but that sort of whiffs of this idea that like college football playoff can probably pretty easily lean back into if the conference deems them ineligible for their championship, we can deem them ineligible for our playoff. That seems like a very easy thing to sort out here.
Just the one thing, the schedule, the non-conference schedule they play is terrible, right? So there's that. And it's not like they're going to have this loaded SEC caliber resume with a bunch of top 15 wins on it, right? It's a stretch to think that, like, again, you brought up JMU. I don't disagree with I'm not saying they're going to be like the Liberty team was when they went and played Oregon a few years ago, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. Like if you want to look at them, even if they are 11-0 and go, oh yeah, they're automatically one of the best teams in the country.
That's fair, but I'm saying on the front end, I don't think the playoff will end up ranking them. I think the playoff can come up with like a reason to say you're just not eligible to play in our tournament because you're not eligible for the conference championship, as they've done with other schools. The last thing, I see a lot of this, and I try not to look at my mentions, but I've had a lot of Texas Tech folks in my mentions talking about why isn't Cincinnati getting punished and why isn't Indiana getting punished? Aside from the fact that there's a whole bunch of reasons, Texas Tech is also not getting punished. Texas Tech has not received any punishment. The player got punished. The Braves signed Jurickson Profar. I know that name might not mean anything to you, Bruce, because you're not a big baseball fan, but he's a pretty nice free agent signing a couple of years ago. Gave him a 2-year contract. He immediately got popped for PEDs. The Braves did not get sanctioned, but Jurickson Profar can't play. And then he got popped again, by the way, so great signing by the Braves, and now he's not playing at all this year. When Calvin Ridley got nailed for his gambling infraction, a couple of other guys, I think Jamison Williams was, I think, PEDs also, or was Jamison Williams gambling? Regardless, the player is getting sanctioned. The team is not. Now, if Texas Tech plays the ineligible player, then they're getting sanctioned. But Texas Tech is not being punished. Indiana's not being punished. The NCAA made very clear, Texas Tech did nothing wrong here. The player is being punished. And that's the way it works in sports. It's the way it works in pro sport. The Braves had no recourse. Jurickson Profar can't play. Tough. It's unfortunate for the Braves, but they're out of luck. He can't play. That's the same situation here. So I don't want to hear this. Why is Texas Tech being punished? Texas Tech is not being punished. And Jamison Williams was both PEDs and gambling. But again, the player gets punished. Brendan Sorsby is being punished here, not Texas Tech.
Ralph, one last thing, just a little caveat here, because I know we talked about the Big 12 and the Big 12 title game and how that could be a punishment. As I was saying, going through some conversation earlier this morning with Tom Mars. One thing he said is there's no limit in the Big 12 bylaws about sanctions. The directors have the sole discretion to decide what's appropriate. The last sentence of that bylaw just gives examples of sanctions, quote, without limitations, end quote. So I think we gravitated as reporters and sports writers to that one example, but he was like, no, there's more to it that is at their discretion than that. So just not to think, oh, that's the only recourse they have beyond a fine, which obviously Cody Campbell could pay. So.
Right. All right. Hey, so what do we think of Michigan State's AD, Jay Batt, leaving after 1 year for Kentucky, which, no offense to Kentucky, that sounds like kind of a lateral-ish move, right? Sort of, one Big Ten, one SEC. Those are relatively equal jobs. And, we don't really get into basketball too much here, but Tom Izzo came out this morning. We're not going to get into all the machinations of what's going on in the hierarchy of Michigan State, but this is a problem that's flowing down. Michigan State also just lost its president, and obviously things aren't going well at Michigan State, and it's driving good people away.
Yeah, Ralph. I mean, it's interesting. Jay Batt, it wasn't just a lateral move you'd think from Michigan State to Kentucky. He went from Georgia Tech to Michigan State to Kentucky. And the moves, I think what's noteworthy, because he was there only about like 375 days. He made a couple of big moves. He fired Jonathan Smith after 2 years on the job, or almost 2 years on the job. That's $30 million that Michigan State has to eat on the Jonathan Smith contract. And then he hired Pat Fitzgerald, which was an interesting move because I think, I think Stu and you were both pretty strong about I don't know if that's like in this modern era of going forward. But one of the things that Batt and Michigan State folks had been touting a lot over his year there was alignment. There is no alignment right now because, as you mentioned, Tom Izzo came out really strong. You had the president who had a relationship with Jay Batt. I think they go back to their days in North Carolina like 25 years ago together, and that was part of it. But still, if you're a Michigan State fan right now, I think you have to be really, really worried. You don't have a president. I don't know who's going to be the athletic director. You hired a coach that, yes, he had success at Northwestern, but if you're him now, all of a sudden you're like, oh, great, the rug just got pulled out from under me. And Ralph, man, I brought this up the other day as it related to Florida State, and we had that great question from one of our readers, and I said the biggest thing you really need is alignment. And right now, you're at Michigan State. It's not a blue blood relative to the Ohio State, Penn State, certainly your rival Michigan, Oregon. You add them in there, you're pretty far down the pecking order to begin with. Now you have no president and no AD. They bailed really fast. What happens next if you're Pat Fitzgerald here?
I think you have to be uncomfortable if you're Pat Fitzgerald simply because the person who hired you is gone. That usually means you have less leeway if things don't go well right off the, no pun intended, bat. I would just put this to all of our fans out there. Unfortunately, if you're going to root for a college football team, you also need to sort of root for your president. You need to root for stability in the president's office. You might want to write to your regents and your local politicians and your senators, hey, could you please leave our school alone? Because that's all this stuff sort of tends to flow down and is very political. And you have very little stability in the president's office, which leads to very little stability in the athletic director's office, which can lead to very little stability in the head football coach's office. All right, Bruce, you want to take a break and we'll bring Stu back and I'll move down to Florida and we'll do some SEC win totals?
Yes, that sounds like a great idea. We're going to teleport Stu from a much higher end place than he's at right now.
All right, guys, our last round of win totals is the SEC. I'm curious how this was for you guys. I found this one to be harder than the other three combined for a couple reasons. First of all, there's so many new coaches. I mean, there's so many new coaches, and who the heck knows out of Auburn, Arkansas, Kentucky, which ones are going to go which way. But also, when I first opened the doc, I was like, these all seem really low. How is there nobody in the SEC with more than 9.5 over under? And then you go, oh, because they're playing 9-game schedules now. And so some of these teams that you would just be like, of course they're going to go 10-2. Now, whatever it might be, like, oh, some of them, no, absolutely you're not, Ralph.
Yeah, welcome to the 9-win, 9-conference game SEC era. I fear we are going to look like hypocrites here because we have been sort of, needling the SEC. It's not quite what it used to be. And, they got to stop boasting about how tough it is. But then you look at these 9-game SEC schedules and you're like, it's pretty tough. That's pretty tricky, man. There are a lot of gimmies on this thing. So I'm with you. It also, I had, because as you said, nobody's at more than 9.5. That's the highest win total. Georgia, Texas.
And they're the only one. There's
Georgia
two.
And Texas. So the only 9.5. And I found myself also fast forwarding to December, whatever, when the playoff field comes out. And what if only one SEC team has 10 wins. Like what does that look like for the playoff committee? And what kind of second revolution comes up when like the SEC only gets 3 playoff teams because, hey, you got a bunch of 8 and 4 teams. So yeah, you can definitely see it and feel it, like that this is going to be a brave new world.
Bruce, you're up. You have the number 1 pick. And who you got?
Okay. Tough one for me here. I want to start out positive, at the risk of losing something that I feel stronger about, as in positive, like taken over. But I can't. I want to be smarter instead of very optimistic and sunny. So I'm sorry, Ryan Silverfield, you're one of the new coaches. I'm going to take the under. Arkansas is 4.5. They have North Alabama and Tulsa in the non-conference. I think they'll win those. The other one's at Utah. That's not a good matchup for Arkansas. And then I'm looking and saying, where can they get the other 3 wins? At Vandy, maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. But Missouri at home, South Carolina at home. I think both of those teams are more talented than Arkansas. I just have a hard time thinking that they're going to get to 5 wins, guys.
Yeah, again, as you said, all these new coaches, it makes it pretty tough. And it's hard to be overly optimistic about these new coaches in such a tough league. And especially considering how Arkansas is done. I guess what I would say, one of my takeaways, and there was not a lot of on-field takeaways from the SEC spring meetings because there was so much of the talk was dominated by what's going on off the field. But one of my on-field takeaways was like, Arkansas has got a lot of work to do. That was kind of a bit of the chatter was Arkansas has got a lot of work to do. So I got the next pick, and I will try to be positive, and go with an over. I hate to shop at the top of the aisle here, at the highest end, but I'm gonna go with Georgia. I like the way the Bulldogs' schedule works out, so I'll take them over the 9.5. Again, I think it's going to be tough for a lot of these SEC teams to get to 10 wins, but I see where they are. I think they were very young last year in a lot of spots and have a lot of that, especially on the defensive side, coming back. They still recruit really well. You have Stockton there. I'm looking there, the highest rated SEC team in SP+. I know that will make that's always something that Bruce likes to hear. So I think between a relatively manageable 9-game conference schedule and a fair amount of returning players and a little more seasoning, I'll take Kirby to get to 10 wins. It's been a while since Georgia hasn't won 10 games in a regular season.
That was going to be my, that was the other consideration
that makes
for
me feel
Ralph.
good. I think that makes me feel good.
That was number 1 on my board.
Cool.
Guys, when I looked at it.
Now I definitely want to give it back.
The 2 teams that I was the most confident in, the team I'm most confident in, is the other 9.5, but they have a much tougher schedule, Ralph. Like when you looked at it, Georgia, no Texas, no A&M or LSU. Those are talented teams. Yeah, they got to go to Alabama and at Ole Miss. But again, you have some margin for error here. And I feel like Georgia usually doesn't stub their toe. They may lose to a team of their level, but I feel like Kirby Smart has done a pretty good job where it's like, where did that come from, that upset? So
yeah, we'll talk about that some more with some of these other teams. Yeah, but that's a good point, Bruce.
And they've had a pretty brutal schedule the last 2 years. Like this is, some of those games have come off the schedule, which may be part of why they've looked a little more mortal recently. So, darn it, I can't believe you did that. No, I'll go. And again, like I looked at these numbers and I just overs kept popping up for me. LSU 8.5. If LSU goes 8-4 with that roster, they might fire Lane Kiffin right on the spot. Like he can't go 8-4. He's got to at least go 9-3 and maybe better. It's not an easy schedule by any means, although the Clemson game might not be as big, quote unquote, big a game as it looks. Obviously, at Ole Miss week 3 will be possibly a kind of a swing game. But yeah, the guys they've brought in, like this isn't just like, oh, they have a good portal class. This is an all-star team. if you can't win 9 games with that, you've got a problem.
Well, listen, Lane, you are still the number one Lane fan on this podcast. I'm sure you're the only one of us left he'll return a text message of. So it falls in line. It really is. You're playing the role there, Stu, of us. But it's also, I do get your point, right? They brought in this all-star team, and you're trying to imagine what happens if they go 8-4 after they just fired the guy for going 8-4, right, Bruce?
Yeah, Ralph, I think on that, I was going to bring up this, which is like they were more talented. Now they had to replace almost the whole offensive line last year, and things just fell apart for them. They have the most talented tight end in college football. That's one of the guys that Lane inherited in Trey'Days Green. You have the best offensive tackle that came in the portal. You have arguably the best safety that came in the portal, maybe the best edge rusher, Sam Levitt. When he's healthy, he's really good. I'm not saying he's going to be the Sam Darnold for Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr., but I think he's a really good fit for what they're going to do. Lane's had success with there's some Jackson Dart in him in terms of like tough guys, scrambles, will play, like that kind of thing works. Matt Corral to some degree was kind of that way. I think they know how to win with that. I think it's a pretty good pick, Stu. I agree with you.
Yeah, so another over for me, this one with a first-time head coach, and that is Kentucky, 4.5. Obviously, Kentucky was bad last year, but like a lot of these teams now, not the same roster. Credit to Kentucky, credit to Will Stein for bringing in a top 10 portal class. The schedule, no Georgia, no Texas. I mean, you gotta start there. It's not like it's easy from there. They do play LSU. They have Alabama and LSU as of now, we would assume 2 toughest games, but they're both at home. So maybe pull an upset there, but you don't really have to. I mean, you can get to 5 wins fairly easily just off the rest of the schedule. So 2 overs for me.
All right. I like that just because I like to go a little off the board. And especially, again, I think you tend to find value at the bottom of these boards shooting for an over. I'm going to go to an under this time, and I got kind of a little bit of a strategy here that maybe I'll elaborate on depending on how it comes back to me. I'm a little worried that Texas A&M, everything, and I was very high on Texas A&M last year. I picked them to make the playoff. I'm trying to butter up my Aggies fans here as I'm about to tell them that I'll take the under 8.5 this year. I think everything really fell into place last year, schedule wise. They hit a lot of places. Hit with their portal receivers, great offensive line that really came together last year. The thing that really worries me is they are totally rebuilding on the offensive line, and they are replacing some very key pieces on the defensive front. Now, Elko seems to do a good job of finding those replacements on the defensive front. I don't love the way the schedule definitely picks up a little bit this year in terms of, last year, again, I think the stat was none of the top 6 or 7 teams in the conference, A&M played only one of like the top 5 or 6 teams in the conference, and that was Texas. So, going to go under on Elko this year at 8.5.
Okay, I don't think that's a crazy move. I am going to go under again for my next pick, and I'm going towards the bottom of the board. And this is Mississippi State. I kind of like their quarterback, but still, I look at their schedule again, and I just think it's a tough road for them. They have ULM and Tennessee Tech. I'll give them those 2 wins. But then their other non-conferences at Minnesota. I think Minnesota is pretty good, and it's a road game. I would give the edge to Minnesota there. They got to go to South Carolina. So where are you getting the other three wins from? Maybe at home with Vandy, maybe at home at Auburn. I think Auburn's going to be more talented. They obviously have a really experienced quarterback who knows that system. I don't know if Jeff Lebby's getting to 5 wins. I look at them I think they're going to be 4-8. And I just don't think the schedule is very favorable for them. I don't know. I mean, Ralph?
Well, can I say just one thing, Bruce? I'm going to guess like you probably don't play blackjack, right? Or do you?
I sometimes do, but at this stage of the game, okay. I'm not going to the casinos.
Okay, because I suspect if like somebody who's a gambler who really like sort of like delves into odds would not like your picks, because again, you're like picking the extreme lows and trying to go below them. I just feel like you may end up being right here, but my instinct is I don't like your odds. Like I just feel like you're pushing the envelope on the odds here, that you're picking two teams that are probably not going to be good and you're picking them to be really bad. So, but hey, well, again, we'll see at the end of the year. You can dunk the ball. You can dunk on me if you want, and you also have another pick. Are you going to be a little optimistic at some point here?
For the record, Ralph, I would have picked both of those by now if they were available at my turn. Okay. Because somebody's got to be bad. You know, when you look at this, you see somebody's
actually got to be really bad, to be honest.
True. And maybe that's the way the conference lays out, that you end up with like a few very bad teams. It did sort of play out that way too last year. I mean, Arkansas didn't win an SEC game last year, if I remember correctly.
And they had a really talented quarterback. They had a really talented quarterback and one of the best running backs in the country, and a really good offensive coordinator. The part that you guys talked about this, I felt like you framed it on the top end in terms of, the beginning of the discussion about the 9 conference games. I actually think it's a bigger issue at the bottom end of it, because all of a sudden now, there's still the Tennessee Tech cupcake, or but I don't think there's going to be the third. Like right now, my 2 teams that I picked on the under, one plays at Utah, who I think we all think has a chance to be a top 25 team, and it's a really tough place to play. And the other one plays at Minnesota, who's been consistently really good. Not great, but been good. So I just think, all of a sudden, instead of 3 cupcake and maybe 4, depending on who you are, you only have 2. And to me, that affects the bottom. That's kind of my strategy.
No, that's a great retort. Honestly, like you pretty much nailed the dismount there. So now make your next pick, and please try to bring a little optimism to the table. I'm
bringing optimism, and I know one of you guys is going to dump on it, but I am a big John Summerall believer. They're sitting at 7.5. They got some really good physical guys. I think he inherited a lot to work with, or a decent amount of really good young talent. And I think the change in culture will benefit them well. I think, I don't want to speak for you, Ralph, but I think you also like the Buster Faulkner OC hire, and those pieces fit, of guys who either worked with him at Georgia Tech or used to work with him at Georgia Tech, in the case of his dynamic receiver from Georgia Tech via Auburn. Schedule, not going to be super easy, but sitting there looking at it going, you know what? I think they can get to 8 wins, because I'm looking at it. FAU and Campbell should win those. Later on, you got Florida State. It's on the road, but Florida State, I don't know what kind of shape Florida State's going to be in by the end of the year. Then it's Vandy, at Kentucky in there, South Carolina at home, at Missouri, at Auburn. I feel like they can get to 8 wins, and I feel like they can get on a roll. I think he's a really good coach, and I think there's a lot for him to work with.
Yeah, I had Florida in my early top 25 in January 25th. Didn't include them in the spring one, but not because I'm jumping totally off the bandwagon by any means. It's now I will say I did not have that on my list here, because that's one of the teams. There's several teams where it's like I'm bullish, but not all of these sleeper teams are all going to deliver, right? So maybe I'm wrong about that, or maybe I'm wrong about Kentucky, who I just went with. But no, you're totally. I think they're one of the top 10, if so, teams in returning production. So, lots to like there.
Yeah, I'm down with that. I think Summerall always fields a good defense, right? He tends to have a good feel for that. And I got to tell you, their receivers look pretty good. And like Dallas Wilson could be a nuclear weapon. Like, I mean, we like that guy beat Texas almost on his own last year, and he didn't really play much of the rest of the year. So if that guy is healthy, all of a sudden that's an emerging star that maybe we don't see coming. All right,
with a really good run game and a punishing physical running back, like they have some firepower.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, more SEC win totals.
All right, so my next pick, and it's more the strategy of this pick that I want to get into. So I I know we're not super high on Alabama, and I don't think any of us see Alabama as a national championship contender this year. And I was actually kind of high on Alabama last year, and it burned me a little bit. But I will take the over here because I feel like the schedule lays out fairly nicely. I can't see them face planting against Florida State again. I was looking at, if you look at the lower half of this win total, of the SEC win totals, Alabama plays most of those teams. It's something like 5 of the 7 lower teams in the win total. There's another thing too, and I didn't do this on the ACC, and it was sticking in my craw ever since. Sometimes you got to match up these schedules and say, if I think A&M is under and A&M and Alabama play each other, that means I'm kind of saying Alabama is going to beat A&M here, right? So I'll take Alabama over 8.5. I don't think they're going to go like. I know they got a lot of turnover. It's a young team, but I keep looking at that manageable schedule and thinking like, yeah, I think they can get to 9 here. But I completely understand that one could really burn me because there's a fair amount of turnover there.
I'm not bullish on Alabama, but I also wouldn't necessarily be so confident that they're not going to be good that I would go under 8.5. The thing with Alabama is I think they'll have a very good defense. So much depends, obviously, on who the quarterback's going to be. But the main problem the biggest problem Alabama had last year was they couldn't run the ball. And I look at it and go, did they even really upgrade their ability? Like, I think they're just going to kind of run it back and hope for something better this year.
I think with the young running back, Crowell coming in there, they think he's the most dynamic running back they've had in a while. And if he's as good as they think he is, I think that gives them a better chance. Also, one sneaky good hire I think they made, Adrian Clem was a really good O-line coach when Dan Lanning plucked him out of the NFL to go be at Oregon. He did a really good job. He knows how to get guys coming off the ball. I think that will help them a lot in the run game and bring a little punch to that. I like Ralph's pick. It wouldn't have been.
It's weird. Yeah. It's weird. I'm not like super bullish on them. Like if you told, like even thinking like, oh, they're going to go 10-2 and like make the playoff, like that seems like a stretch. But again, then you marry the schedule. That's pretty manageable.
The other part of them that's good. So I know I've talked to those guys in Tuscaloosa, and they've been excited that they gotten a lot bigger on the defensive front.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I think is kind of underrated, they have a huge, long secondary. And it's really good. It might be as good a secondary as there is in college football. And I think that doesn't get probably talked about enough. Again, this isn't doesn't feel like a Nick Saban defense up front, but on the back end, it could be really, really good.
Here's the last thing before I let you make 2 picks, Stu. And it goes back to what Bruce mentioned about, or actually maybe I think it was, I can't remember who was mentioned. One of you mentioned this idea of like teams lose games that they're not supposed to. And like that has totally been Alabama the last couple of years, right? Like you say, oh, they have a pretty manageable schedule this year. And then it's like, okay, where's the stinker coming this year that I'm not? Like that's been the thing that has been. So
are you going to go back to? Are you going to flip it to go to under now in a Ralph?
No. I have almost talked myself out of my pick, but I'm sticking with it. You go for 2 here. 2 picks here, Stu, before I do talk myself out of my own pick.
All right, so I need an under. I went over the first 2 times. And to the point earlier of like, somebody's got to be not that good, right? They can't all be like, well, that win total looks suspiciously low. So I'm going to go under on Tennessee 7.5. And the interesting thing is they have a quarterback competition between a true freshman and a redshirt freshman. For most of college football history, that was totally normal. Yeah. Now, in
both
this landscape,
highly recruited, right? Both a 4 and a 5-star.
You'd feel good about it. But now it's
right?
like, wait a minute, you didn't bring in a 6th-year senior transfer portal guy. What's wrong with you? But it also, I think, as much as Josh Heupel is known for offense, the defense had a lot to do with when they had that playoff, just a couple playoff teams, and it really went completely in the wrong direction last year. And so in comes Jim Knowles, who a year ago was the toast of college football, the first $3 million coordinator. The knock on him, though, was it takes a while for people to pick up his system. And that proved to be absolutely the case at Penn State. So is he going to come in and like Tennessee's going to jump 60 spots in the defensive rankings? maybe, wouldn't count on it.
It's good logic for you, Stu. I kind of like where you're going. I wouldn't have gone there just because of the number. I was like, man, they're really talented. But I get it. When you started talking about Jim Knowles, that was my one concern. Is it does take a little while for players to absorb his defense and get what he wants. And he had a lot of talent at Penn State, obviously. So I think it's you backed your pickup pretty well. So what else you got for us? You going to stay optimistic or swing back to?
I'm going to go swing back to positive. And I cannot believe I'm the one making this pick. I thought for sure it was going to be Bruce, maybe Ralph. Texas over 9.5. Even with Ohio State coming to town, they're a lot. I mean, they're going to be a lot better, right? Are they going to be national championship better? TBD. Still not totally sold that Sark is a national championship coach, but they can get 10 wins.
Okay, so I'm going to have this existential crisis play out for me when I have to fill out an AP poll. Because do you avoid taking Texas number one again because you got burned last year, even if the evidence suggests they're actually in better shape to be preseason national championship pick and number one? But I'm not going to play that. I'm giving everybody a preview. We're going to end up having that discussion.
Since you brought it up, I don't remember who was your preseason number one in the
It
top
was
20?
Texas. Last year it was Texas. Okay. I picked them number one. I did the whole, picked them to win the national championship, wrote a great column about how SEC, they were about to become the SEC's next Alabama. They were going to replace Alabama as being the team that every year puts out a national championship contending team. I would argue I wasn't that far off, or maybe just I was a little early, but we'll get into that some other time. But I just want to give people an understanding that Texas is going to kind of haunt me a little bit. I was going to stay away from them. So I'm glad you took them.
What I remember is I had them number one too in the spring. And then this would have been pretty close to the season because I remember you were on the show by then, Ralph, and it was like, do you think we're all going to regret having picked the team number one that has to replace 4 offensive linemen? And sure enough, that was their Achilles heel. I think there'll be a better offensive line this year, but it's not. There were still some questions coming out of spring.
Yeah. You definitely nailed how this goes wrong, right? Last year. All right. My last pick. This is definitely a no fun pick because what fun is picking Vandy under 5.5. And it's also one of those, we all whiffed so badly. Vegas whiffed. Everybody whiffed on Vandy last year. Everybody was like, they're going to regress. That 7 wins the year before, that was their high water mark. And we really missed badly because we weren't paying attention to the fact that they had a lot of players back from that other team and they do such a good job of money balling the portal and finding their guys and how good Pavia was going to be. So we really whiffed on Vandy last year. And I'm fearful that I'm whiffing again. And I'm just seeing the helmet and screaming regression and that they're going to fall back. And I don't necessarily think we're looking at 2-10, 3-9 Vandy, but you throw that extra SEC game on there, a non-conference game against NC State. That's no gimme. And it just feels like this is the year Vandy regresses and you're looking at more of a 5-7, which wins me the bet.
Ralph, can I ask you a bigger picture question? I don't think it's outlandish to think that. Obviously, I thought Pavia was phenomenal for them. Stowers was a big weapon. Without that, do you think all of a sudden this is all right, they're not going to be a top 25 team, period? I know they landed a 5-star quarterback last year, but
listen, we both cover coaching searches, right? Pretty in detail. And how many conversations about the field and the pool of coaches where Clark Lee was mentioned for this job or that job. And we all have a lot of respect for Clark Lee. Was the first thing you were asked, but can he do this without Pavia? But can he do this? How much of this is Tim Beck, the offensive coordinator, and Jerry Kill and the whole Pavia, the whole New Mexico State Mafia coming to Vanderbilt? And I don't think it's that. I don't think he's totally beholden to that and that it's all going to fall apart here. I just think it's a very tough conference and they have to rebuild. Like if you look at their returning production, it's way down. They have a freshman quarterback who could be unbelievable, but he's a freshman quarterback. So I'm not saying like it all crumbles around Vanderbilt and what happened last year we'll never see again, but I do think this could be just a reset, and it's hard to reset in the SEC, Bruce.
Yeah. We will see. That's one of the more fascinating subplots to me of, coming out of this year is Vandy here to stay, or is Vandy not going to go back to 2-10, but are they going to go back to being a second division, lower tier SEC program?
Yeah. How much have they raised the floor?
Yeah. The thing I would say about Vandy is when you said, Ralph, like we were all wrong about them last year. I think it's because we were all wrong on how good Pavia could be. Like, if you go back to the year before when they beat Alabama, it was like he emerged as a character, right? He emerged as like the spark plug, but it wasn't like he was a dominant quarterback that year. Last year he was.
He was good. He was a playmaker. Some of us good. Last year went to great.
Yeah. Some of us voted for him to win the Heisman, and so I think it's inevitable that they take a step back. It's just like that step back might still be 6-6.
All right, I'm rounding this off, and I'm going to finish it up with some positivity. I'm sitting there looking at, speaking of another super talented quarterback, I got South Carolina to bounce back. I know that's another year, another offensive coordinator for Lenora Sellers to work with. 6.5, not a huge number. They could arguably have the best defensive player in the country. On one side, I think
Dylan Stewart.
Dylan Stewart is a top 5 pick. He is super freaky edge rusher. They have some pieces around Lenoris. We'll see how Kendall Briles does. I think it's probably a better fit style wise for Lenoris than what they had last year. I look at their schedule and it's like, all right, Kent State's about as bad as you get in FBS. Then they have Towson. They get Mississippi State at home. That's a chance it gets a little bit of momentum to go 3-0 out of the gate. They have to go to Tuscaloosa, not easy, but then they host Kentucky. I feel pretty good that they should. Shane Beamer, and again, he's definitely, there's people talking about he's on the hot seat. I think with some reason, because we know expectations are high. There's a really good chance for them. I'd be disappointed if I was them and I'm not 4-1, right? And then after that, there's a lot of tough games. We know they end at Clemson. I don't think this is the most talented Clemson team. It's probably one of the least, outside of Sammy Brown. I'm not sure that there's that many wow guys in that program right now. So yeah, I'll take them at 6.5. I think they can win 7 games. I think they can win 8 games actually if Lenoris plays like he did 2 years ago, and they have the best defensive player, arguably the best defensive player in the SEC. That's a lot to work with for Shane Beamer.
That was my other on my last pick. It was between Texas and South Carolina over.
There has been a lot of ping-ponging around there, right? I think year 1 exceeded expectations. Year 2 fell flat of expectations. Year 3 that's been the MO there under Beamer. So yeah, I kind of like that. I definitely had eyed that. And again, on our, our friend Bill Conley's returning production, South Carolina brings a lot back.
I feel like I'm in line with Bill Conley more than I think. I just like a lot of times it's like you'll say something, I'm like, yeah, that's something I agree with. That's something.
No, I know. I like to just tease you a little bit. So Stu, who do you like here? What team do you like other than your own? Because I actually like yours. I think you might have nailed this, Stu.
I think that Bruce's is similar. Like I have a similar confidence in Bruce's that I do. I do like my own team. Yes, there's a little concern that he took 2 under 4.5s, but I agree with him on all of them. Like all 4. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, 3 of them were on my list that I would have taken if it came to that. And Florida, I didn't, but I agree with him on that. So I got to go with Bruce.
For me, Ralph, the thing you said before about blackjack, I look at Stu has the team that I am the most confident in, and that's Texas. I get it. You have history from last year on that. The schedule is really rough in terms of, because I'm sitting there saying, all right, they don't have to play Ohio State in Columbus, but they still have to play Ohio State. Even if they're not quite as good, I don't think they'll be quite as good on defense as they were last year. And I think Texas will be better because of more experience and everything. It's just the schedule is really, to me, in terms of schedule strength between the difference, I think Texas is better than Georgia, but I think Georgia's schedule is way more manageable to get to that number. What I could see happening is Texas still wins the SEC title and wins the SEC championship game. But I don't know. I look at it in that regard as like Stu has some stuff that I agree with. Like his logic on Tennessee was really good. His logic on LSU was really good. I'm not sure I'm seeing Kentucky. I wouldn't have taken them under, but I don't know. That's one that's like, it could go either way for me. I'm not like neither side would have surprised me, to be honest.
Well, I'll just wrap this up by making a pre-excuse. We're recording this a little earlier than we usually record the pod. It's been a busy week chasing down Sorsby stuff. I don't know if I have quite as much research as I would have like coming into this episode. So I am giving myself a pre-excuse and saying that I could have used a little more time to study on this test.
I'm just glad
Mr. Feldman.
I'm just glad Ralph did not pick Oklahoma for the under, because I feel like every chance you were shoveling coal on them.
I know, and I actually was looking at them. They were in my over pick. If I would have picked Oklahoma, it would have probably gone over. I actually think their offense has a chance to be a lot better this year.
That's it for this show. Later this week, I won't be on the show, but Bruce and Ralph will answer your mailbag questions. You can send them to the audiblepod@gmail.com.